Welcome to the channel that gets to discuss topical issues, those issues you want to listen to once and listen to the second time so that you get the real gist of what happens. And in this channel, we get to bring those people who are the talking point. We want them to come and tell us their stories. We want the hosts to say things from their mouth. My name is Musa Dlodlo Umpangazita. It's good to be with you. And today we have another scintillating program because we're talking to a man who has been through a lot. He'll be telling us his story about his brushes with the regime in Zimbabwe. We'll be hearing his stories about what he thinks about the coming elections, as well as what he envisages for the country, the beautiful land of Zimbabwe, to be like in the future. And that is none other than Mthulisi Hanana, popularly known as Unobhala, who is also the Secretary General of ZAPU. All right, we say good day to you, Nobala, and welcome to Blue Sky Media. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mbangazita, and also thank you to your listeners.
Right, maybe to get us started, it's best for you to introduce yourself to the people because people know you, but they want to know more about you. Maybe just give us a brief of yourself.
That is one of the most difficult things to do, try and introduce yourself, because there is who you think you are and there is a bit tricky. But nonetheless, my name is Mthulisi Hanana. I am the Secretary General for the mother party ZAPU. I think I am the youngest Secretary General from 1961 to date. There's never been a Secretary General my age. But also, I would want to introduce myself as a nationalist, a Nkomoist, and a devolutionist. These are my fundamental beliefs in politics. I do not want to view myself also as a politician, but as a soul that is in a journey, in a quest for justice. So that's who I am. Why am I SG? I do not know. I think I am in politics simply because I want to participate in the change movement in our country, and also in preserving the legacy of the liberation struggle, because these are the things that move me. Thank you, Pangazita.
The mention of your name brings about a lot of stories that people get to read about or they've heard to hear pertaining to how at one time or in a number of occasions you had to run for dear life. Maybe tell us about that portion of your life where you have had to be on the run and how that is it come about.
You see, one of the most tragic things that can ever happen in Zimbabwe is that 40 years after independence, there is still no freedom of expression. You are still not guaranteed of freedom after you express yourself. We still have a lot of people that are prisoners of conscience, either who are in prison because of expressing what is in their consciences, or who are in prison in their bodies because they can't express their consciences for fear of victimization, fear of state brutality and violence against them and their families. So it's said that it's something that I have to talk about, and I'm not under a Ian Smith or a colonial regime. I was born way after independence. I was born maybe at the height or just at the end of Kukura, and where one would have hoped that some of these things were not going to happen. But I've had a lot of brushes with the law, but the most prominent ones were at the time. There's a time where Dr. Tabenga passed on, and remember at that time I was the director of the Dr. Tabenga Foundation, and I was asked to speak at his funeral. And one of the things that I found very strange is that at that funeral I spoke about things that I felt were dear to Mr. Tabenga, because remember, for about 2 to 3 years of his life, last 2 3 years of his life, I was spending virtually almost every day with him if he was not in hospital or away. So there is so many conversations that we've had. So when I was asked to speak, I thought, let me just let the world in to his private musings, to the things that were in his heart, to his regrets, to how he viewed life in old age when he looked back.
The death of Dr. Mthulisi Hanana gives us an opportunity to do right by him. Those that made false and fake promises to the foundation, as you view his mortal remains today, I appeal to you to honor your pledges. The business people that refuse to support him, claiming he's an opposition leader and a person of interest, as you view his mortal remains today, may you see a statesman that is worth supporting. Politicians who viewed him as a threat and snapped his foundation to the point of refusing to attend the Machiavellian dialogue that he initiated and refused to receive awards at the foundation launch, as you view his mortal remains today, see an astute politician with no cabinet scandal whose vision is worth supporting. I must mention this, I know it might sound controversial, but it is true. Outside ZAPU, the only other person who supported the foundation and who indeed attended the launch is Nelson Chamisa. We are grateful and we commend you, Mr. Chamisa, for being mature and sober at that moment. To the government officials, as you view the mortal remains of Ubaba, please remember that he stole nothing from government. Remember, he did not get the salary as a soldier upon retirement and subsequent arrest. Remember, he receives no benefit or gratuity from serving in the army. Remember, his farm was not given to him by government. Remember, you detained him for 4 years. Please read the letters I wrote to you, appealing for you to support him and the foundation. And when you go to your offices after today, please do the right thing. To ZANU-PF members who call him a sellout, as you look at his mortal remains today, take a good look at him and tell us after today that indeed that is the face of a sellout. To members in ZANU who were once in ZAPU, as you view the mortal remains of this CEO senior, may you repent and commit to support his vision. Clearly, the explanation that you need permission from ED or Chiwenga to do so does not suffice. The ED did support TT in his last days. I wonder if that is the message that TT must take to Joshua Nkomo. Young people, as you view the mortal remains of this gallant son of the soil, please remember he changed the course of the country at a young age. Please rise up today and be counted. To our people from this region who continuously voted for others when Dr. Tabama heeded your call for a national leadership with an inclusive, non-racial, non-tribal and a devolved government, may you look at his mortal remains and ask yourselves what must be done for his legacy to echo in the corridors of power. To Dr. Tabema, I say, fare thee well, Baba. Get to the other side and speak of the misery of the people. Tell Tongo Karanimchuru that the army now assists in political transitions and now shoots innocent civilians. Tell Lookout Masugu that your names do not appear in any of the history books. Tell Jinintuta that his murderers have not seen the inside of a cell to date. Tell the victims of Kukuraundi that acknowledgement and apology have not come 30 years on. Tell Tenjuele Sabe that she is a national heroine and will do her best for her to be accorded such a status even posthumously. Tell Chief Kaisa Ndiweni that umntana kuthwele nzima. Tell Joshua Nkomo that abantwana basabalele umhlaba wonke akuphileki. Tell him also that amanzi kaZambezi azafika. You left the project in the able hands of Sarah Ndlovu uzawafikisa amanzi. Tell him, Siga, that you died endleleni because akula mithi lapha. Tell Kanyison Ndlovu, my first boss, that I miss his wisdom. Finally, I see a hand as the cloud of a man. It is not a fist, but a hand. It is not a palm, but isandla sesocha eliphethe umntwana. And
unfortunately, because there were a lot of uncomfortable truths that were said, I found myself on the run. I found myself being followed by state agents. I found myself and my family vulnerable in independent Zimbabwe, and I had to flee and leave the country. But because I'm somebody who believes that I have to contribute in the course of our country, discourse of our country, I'd gotten asylum and offers of asylum in virtually many countries in Europe. I thought, no, let me go back to my country and try and live to fight another day. I went back to Zimbabwe, and the following year, we started a campaign during COVID to say ZANU-PF must go. The reason why I started that ZANU-PF must go mass campaign is because people were not allowed to gather, people were not allowed to show dissent, people were not allowed to show any dissatisfaction towards what the government was doing under the guise of COVID. Even now, you find that there is no COVID, but you see when you try and get clearance from the police, they will tell you about COVID. But ZANU-PF meetings are cleared without COVID. So we said to ourselves, let's just show them in the midst of COVID that we're not happy with what they're doing, and we're going to put on masks in according to the COVID guidelines. But our masks must carry our message. We saw an opportunity during COVID to use COVID to give a message, and I started that campaign to say ZANU-PF must go. But the campaign now was on masks. On 28 July 2020, the height of COVID, when there was curfew between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. At around about 25 minutes to 1 a.m., where we did not expect anyone to be moving around. Our property that we were staying at was surrounded by the army, a lot of soldiers, police, CIOs, and the team that we've gotten to it was Ferret. Try and imagine armed men coming to look for an unarmed citizen whose only crime was to call for an alternative government, whose only crime was to point out to the fact that ZANU-PF is not doing justice to the people of Zimbabwe in terms of governance, in terms of respect to human rights and property rights, in terms of service delivery, in terms of making sure that there's no corruption, in terms of provision of basics in the country. So you have an army, a whole battalion, you have a threat team, a atomic of sorts coming to look for an unarmed civilian. That's how brutal the issue was. I managed to escape that night and fled. But for about 6 weeks, my family was harassed. My family was being followed until I thought, let me come out of hiding and rescue my family and leave the country. That is how I left the country. So it's just a sad tale, because our children retrogressed in terms of child development. We had to get counseling, we had to get trauma support out of the country. And remember, it was hard to leave the country during COVID. But also, what is said, Mpanga says that at the time when this happens, my wife had just delivered a baby. I think the baby was 6 weeks old, and she had come early. She was born preterm. So you can imagine how fragile a woman is at that particular stage. But the government didn't care, and they just don't care. So, we have always believed that when Smith was in power and he was fighting our fathers left the country for Zambia, for Angola, for Algeria, for Botswana, for Russia, just so that they can save themselves, but also to strategize and see how they can come back into the country and continue with the struggle, which is what I believe most activists and most politicians do once in a while. Yeah, that's it.
There are those that say a lot of people who say there is brutality of activists, but seeking recognition or to get funding from international institutions. What's your response to that? There are those that hold that assertion. Raise it.
One of the things that you must realize, Banazita, is that one of the things that the government wants to do is to make sure that these incidents are not documented, these incidents are not spoken about, they are trivialized, they are viewed as lies and fabrications. And it's exactly what they did even during Kukuraund. People were being killed, and in Parliament, the Minister of State will feign ignorance. People were being killed, the President will say it's a lie. ZANU-PF members will also say it's lies. So this is an old strategy where a government wants to discredit anyone that speaks against them, or that speaks about state brutality. But I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened. We saw people being shot on the 1st of August, and people died, and still lie and shift and try and present a scenario of that thing not happening. In January 2019, there was a lockdown or a shutdown for 3 days. We experienced state brutality. where people were being shot at using live ammunition. I think at one time I was in Sisinda. I witnessed these things, but government do not want these things to be spoken about. This is a government that has always thrived on propaganda. This is a government that has always thrived on lying. This is a government that has always tried to make sure they suppress the views of the people. That is why now we have a PVO bill to try and trivialize, rather, and try and control the work of the NGOs. That is why we have a patriotic act, a patriotic bill, where there is certain things. I mean, we're coming now wants to try and define what patriotism is in terms of what one says and how it behaves. So we are in a state that is being controlled. But I also must say, Mpangazita, there are some, though I've not met them, I do not want to dispute the fact that some would want to take advantage of the plight of Zimbabweans to try and get recognized, to try and seek asylum is somewhere. I mean, things are hard. People come up with a lot of these stories to try and survive. But still, I will still blame that squarely on ZANU-PF. Why would people want to come up with an excuse of leaving their country? Why would people leave a good government? Why would people want to lie so they can leave a good country? It shows that the country is bad. If that is happening, ZANU-PF must not go to town about it. What they must do is to try and offer services to the people, deal with corruption, deal with unemployment, respect human rights, respect property rights. So whether it's happening or not, if it's happening, the blame is on ZANU-PF. If it's not happening, the blame is also on ZANU-PF because they are lying and saying these things happen. I have been accused of the same. But I've stayed in Germany, Mpangazit. If I wanted to lie, I would have stayed there, not come back. I've traveled to Europe. I've been to different countries. I've been offered asylum by a lot of these European Union countries, and I've said to them, I want to go back home. I've been offered the asylum by a lot of African countries, but I've always said, I want to go back home. So ZANU-PF is lying most of the times.
In all this that we are talking about, the violence that we get to see, we are going to an election period. Maybe let's start with the election period that we tend to see violence rearing its ugly head whenever we go to elections. And most of the times, if not all the times, it's young people that are involved. How is that so? What makes young people to be easily used like that? Yet the young person of yesteryear was able to mobilize and they won the country. Why are young people being used to hurt each other?
Mpangazita, young people are victims in this process. There is someone behind young people that is pulling the strings. And you must realize that the reason why we have violence in Zimbabwe is because from the onset, when we came from the bush after Lancaster, in the build up to the 1980 elections, what ZANU-PF did was they knew they had no support. They started a process of pungwes and systems of indoctrination, and pungwes were one such method. And people were being frog marched to places, forced to sing, raped, threatened with violence, beaten up. That is the campaign method of an unattractive party. So, and to make sure, this is on 1980 where people were beaten. And then in 1985, there was Kukura so they were killing people. So this is how ZANU-PF has thrived. In 1990, you remember there's an advert that was trending to say they show an accident, two cars colliding. Then they say, this is one way to die. The other way is to vote. I think for Zoom at the time, it was called Zoom. So they have always thrived on beating up people, forcing people to vote for them. Then we have a period of almost peace between 1990 and 1999 up to the resurgence of MTC. What do we see? We see again an orgy of violence. We see an orgy of blood, a bloodbath in the country. A lot of people being killed, disappeared, houses burned, people displaced, people fleeing the country. We have lost more people in Zimbabwe to politics than other countries have lost to war. Actually, ZANU-PF has killed more Zimbabweans that they killed Rhodesians during the war. ZANU-PF has killed more people in independent Zimbabwe than we lost people when we were fighting for independence. And now these old men, what they've done, they've made sure that our young people are unemployed. They've looted the country dry and made sure that there's no employment. And now we have desperate young people that are hungry for anything. And when they go and beat up people, they never do those things sober. They are given drugs, they are given alcohol, and they are promised money. And they go and beat people up, and they don't even know why they're beating people up. They're just being used. That's why I say these young people are victims of a country that allows them to go through the education system and they're not employed. Victims of a country that allows them to go through an education system, they get jobs in the civil service and they are not paid much. And so to try and make a living, to try and get something in life, people do anything. And unfortunately, at the top of that, we have young people that go through what they called militia, youth brigades and stuff like that, where they are being brainwashed and told all sorts of nonsense. So when they do those things, some of them actually thinking that they're doing this in service to their country in defense from imaginary enemies. And the difference between the young people of yesterday and the young people of today mainly is that the young people of yesterday understood that they have to be free. But our generation does not really value freedom. We value money. We value tokens. We value tickets. That is why you find that people like there's this guy, Passion Java, or anyone who's rich, when they parade the streets, there's a lot of people that follow them because this is the ultimate dream of young people. But the young people of yesterday, their dream was to see themselves free. Their dream was to see themselves in an independent Zimbabwe. And maybe this is done because the young people of yesterday were excluded from the oppression. They were excluded from the gravy train of Smith. But unfortunately, this gravy train of ZANU-PF tries as much as possible to conscript as many as possible. So now the fight is to belong to ZANU-PF. The fight is to get as close to the feeding trap as possible. So when some of these people are beating people up, they want to be noticed. They want to be brought closer. They want to be given mining claims, money, and tenders, as it were. Yeah.
Then there is this element that says we are in this crisis because of the economy that is not functioning well, and a portion says that it attributes this to the fact that the country has been under illegal sanctions, saying because of these sanctions the country is struggling. No wonder why the young person is in a state that they are in, the economy is in a state that it's in, the country is in a state that it's in. What's your take on the issue of sanctions? It's been raised as one that sanctions go away.
Yeah, you see, Mbarazita, the starting point will be to say the economy is not functioning. But these ZANU-PF thugs inherited an economy in 1980. What did they inherit? They inherited a country that was functioning. They inherited a strong currency. They inherited industry. But you can't blame anyone because they inherited all these things. And the problem is that ZANU-PF wanted to be in power for the sake of being in power. We in Zimbabwe trained our people to be a government in waiting. ZANU-PF started training people after independence. We were ready to govern, but ZANU-PF used the parallel of the gun to rob people of their true independence. And we started having a lot of scandals. I mean, as early as 1981, we had people that were in court, ZANU-PF members that were in court for stealing money, for stealing a lot of things. At that time, I thought maybe ZANU-PF had a conscience, but the big wigs were stealing and nothing was happening to them. Remember the Willowgate scandal. There's a lot of corruption that was happening soon after independence. So we cannot say that the economy is declining because of anyone else. It's declining because of ZANU-PF, because of corruption, because of looting, because of gross misgovernance and incompetence. Now, coming to the issue of sanctions, the country was already on a downward spiral way before sanctions. So before we can get to the sanctions, Mpangazita, maybe let's go back to the things that went wrong before sanctions. There was corruption before sanctions. Let's try and stop corruption. There was looting before sanctions. Let's try and stop looting. There was disrespect and disregard for property rights. Remember, ZAPU lost a lot of properties worth billions of dollars in today's terms, because there was total disrespect for property rights. There was total disregard for human rights. People were being killed under ZANU-PF. So these are things that had been going wrong. And also, you remember that one of the things that is killing the country is nepotism and cronyism, and trying to bring as many people to the feeding trap. That is why now we have a lot of provinces, and it's unnecessary. We have a lot of centers of power. I mean, if you go to a district level, there is a lot of parallel structures, a lot of people that are employed, and you wonder if they have to be there. We have a lot of people that are evading tax and payment of tax. So we have so much that is going wrong, so that the effect of sanctions on Zimbabwe is not really that significant, because we have a lot of other things that are more weighty that are going wrong. Even during the war, Smith had one of the best economies in Southern Africa, breadbasket of Africa, and he was under sanctions. So one of the things that you must realize, when these guys were dealing with Mugabe and dealing with criminals around him, they said one of the things that Mugabe has failed to do is to come up with sanction-busting measures. But guess what? They have failed, and now they're using sanctions as an excuse to loot. They are using sanctions as an excuse to do a lot of things. I mean, we have 15 billion that is said rumored to have been stolen. I'm trying to imagine if we injected 15 billion in a country with sanctions, what could have happened? We have ministers that looted 60 million for COVID funds. Nothing happened to them. We have a lot of other people that looted from the Public Service Commission. We have medical aid schemes being looted. We have people that, like Rushoya, that are transporting gold, and they are arrested and then they are reinstated and stuff like that. So you can see that there is no appetite for dealing with corruption. One thing that I can say, I think these people know that their days are numbered. And what they are coming in to do is to steal and suck the country dry, so that once they come out of power, they have a cushion or something to rely on. But what I can also say is that the people of Zimbabwe are getting fed up with every day that passes. There is nothing in schools. There is nothing in hospitals. There is no roads. One day, people will take the law into their own hands, and they will deal with this raw government decisively.
Just briefly, you touched on something very interesting to do with ZAPU properties. Why have they not come back to ZAPU? The argument on some front is that ZAPU merged with ZANU-PF, and hence the properties are still with their owners. That's one assertion. The other one being more of questions to say that after all these years, why would the properties not be returned? If a lot of senior ZAPU administrators, including the ZAPU leader, were in government at very top level positions, if the properties were not returned, isn't that a sign that says, this thing is with their owners?
Let me be frank with you. The Unity Accord is clear, very clear. That was signed. It was a merger of ZAPU, the party, and the properties are not, we call them ZAPU properties, but remember, those properties were paid for by individuals who are known, not by the party as a collective. The only thing that those people had in common is that they were members of ZAPU and ZIPRA. So, if you remember well, the Unity Accord also did not merge ZIPRA and ZANLA. So, then the next thing that you must also realize that there is people that were ZAPU members that did not join the Unity Accord. We have people as senior as Romanyati, one of the Lancaster House negotiators. We have people like Fulbrook, who's Reggie Fulbrook Austin. These are senior members of ZAPU that are known, that never went into Unity. So they cannot forfeit their properties because some have decided to take their shares to Zanifeva. There's anyone who did that. I doubt anyone did that. So and then there's other properties that belonged to companies with directors that are known, and these directors were ZAPU or ZIPRA members, we have like neutral properties. There is no justification to say the owners of those properties are in ZANU, because they never went there. If ever they say directors I went to ZANU, they never went there with their properties. I mean, if you join a political party in Pangazi, you don't join a political party with your shares from Econet. If you have Econet shares, you don't join a political party with your stock exchange shares or any other property that you have. Your property remains your property. So the assertion that these things are with their owners is a lie. You must also realize, Bangaza, that when we came from the push to independence, ZANU PF had nothing. Even their headquarters was built for them by the Koreans. These are people that have no foresight. These are people that have no vision. These are people that are myopic. These are people that only live for today. So there is nothing that intimidates them as the vision of ZAPU. ZAPU had farms, ZAPU had houses, ZAPU had buildings. Magnet House was our building. Vanguard House, that was our office in Harare, was paid for. It was our property. So for ZANU PF to survive and to thrive, they to undermine and confiscate not only our properties, but also our archives, our historical archives. Why? Because ZAPU is intimidating. On the economic front, I mean, give back ZAPU properties. ZAPU becomes a giant overnight. We become the richest entity in Zimbabwe overnight. You will give back our history.
Will the properties be ever returned?
Yeah, let me say this, Mpangazit. We will not stop fighting for properties, particularly this young generation. We are not like our fathers that were tired from the war. That's why at times they gave up and made concessions. We are a generation of young ZAPU members that are not going to be giving concessions unnecessarily. We are going to fight for the properties. But remember, the base of these properties is that it was said that ZAPU is a dissident organization. So ZAPU leaders are dissidents. And hence there was a gazette of 1984, I presume, that allowed, if not 1982, that allowed the properties to be taken on the guise that they are supporting dissident activity. So everyone who is in ZANU cannot say that now they've joined ZANU to get their properties, because that has not been rescinded, that has not been revoked. The statutory instrument that says ZAPU is a dissident organization is still in full force in Zimbabwe. So what it means, even if Mohati is in ZANU, Mohati is still viewed by the law as a dissident that is in ZANU. Stembi Sonyon is viewed as a dissident that is in ZANU. So anyone who says they were once ZAPU, they are there because they are dissident, because had it not been so, that a statutory instrument, that gazette, could have been reversed, and the president has power to unilaterally reverse that gazette that says ZAPU is a dissident organization and ZAPU members are dissidents. So anyone who says no, I'm with my properties in ZAPU is just deceiving themselves, whistling in the graveyard, because they are there at the mercy of ZANU and they are viewed as dissidents, and the status quo of being dissidents is there, and they are not even enjoying any benefit from their properties. In any case, some who are still in ZANU did not contribute a dime to the buying of those properties. You cannot come and claim that the properties are yours because you are ZAPU. You can only claim that the properties are yours because you made periodic contributions in the acquisition of those properties.
Right. Let's wrap it up. What does the future hold for Zimbabwe? What do you envisage for Zimbabwe? What's the path that the country should take? I'm sure at some point there must be something that is able to bring us together, or something that at least we can agree to disagree on peacefully. What do you envisage of the future?
There's two options in Bangladesh. Option one is that we need to come up with a strategy as opposition parties of dislodging ZANU PF, because the biggest sanctions that we have are not those imposed on us by Britain or any other country, but they are those imposed on us by ZANU PF. That is the biggest sanction, the biggest enemy of Zimbabwe is ZANU PF. The biggest devil in terms of being anti-progressive, in terms of the oppression of our people, is ZANU PF. So we must collectively coalesce at some point together as Zimbabweans, outside even the jacket of politics, maybe have a broader scope of the church, civil society, students movement, teachers movement, anyone who's Zimbabwean who loves the country must come together and we dislodge ZANU-PF. I've said to people concerning the patriotic bill, my biggest obligation to prove my patriotism is to fight ZANU-PF. So that is what must happen. We must fight ZANU-PF. But if our people don't realize it now, that they need to come together and fight ZANU-PF, I think circumstances will force them. And without anyone telling them, I'm sure there's going to be a revolution that could be nameless, faceless. When people are fed up, they will take to the streets and they will march to State House and get back their country. What we need now, Bangazita, is to deal with ZANU-PF and deal with them decisively. We must stop this thing of saying, let's have political tolerance. And who are we tolerating? We say no to violence, we have marches and stuff like that. No, we know who the enemy is. We know who is violent. Let's not have these marches and tolerance. We should not tolerate ZANU-PF at any level. If you know Makelwane is ZANU, they must always be reminded that we're in this situation because you are voting ZANU-PF, because you are supporting ZANU-PF. When anyone goes to hospital and they don't find the medication, they must be bold about it. It is a product of ZANU-PF. The problem is squarely on the shoulders of ZANU-PF. This is what we need. We need a serious conscientization of our people and our children that the problem that we have is ZANU-PF. We also need a massive voter registration and voter education drive where we show people the reason why they must vote and why they must vote ZANU-PF out. The biggest problem that we have, the devil in Zimbabwe, the problem that we have, the antithesis of progress in Zimbabwe is ZANU-PF, and that is what we must deal with and deal with decisively. Let's put our differences aside because the problem and the enemy is one, and the enemy of Zimbabweans is ZANU-PF, its structures, its members, its people, its institutions, everything that is associated with ZANU is an enemy to the progress of our people, and we must deal with it thoroughly and decisively as we go to 2023.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hanana, for joining us in the program. That's Mthulisi Hanana, the Secretary General of ZAPU, who's been telling us about a number of issues pertaining to the political sphere in the country. Thank you so much, Mr. Hanana.
Thank you so much, Mpangazita. You have a good night.
Same to you, and thank you so much. We remember this is the channel where we endeavor to bring all views, and we want you to hear from the host's mouth. We don't want to speak on anyone's behalf, and we don't want to take anyone's side, but we want you to be the judges after all has been said and done. Until next time, from me to you, it's cheers. Tada.